There are some stories out there that are just so dark, so twisted, they stick with you. And today, we're diving into one of Germany's most infamous cold cases. It's the story of the brutal and just completely baffling murders at a remote farm called Hinterkaifeck. And that quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head for this case. We're about to dive into a crime that seems to completely defy any kind of logical explanation. It just makes no sense. Okay, so picture this. It's 1922. We're in post-World War I Bavaria. Things are chaotic, economic collapse, political turmoil everywhere. And our story takes place on this isolated little farmstead, Hinterkaifeck, miles from anywhere, where let's just say, a deeply troubled family was living pretty much cut off from the world. And then, for 4 long days, nothing. The farm just went silent. Mail starts piling up. The kids don't show up for school. Nobody's seen doing the daily chores. Finally, that eerie silence gets broken when some concerned neighbors decide, okay, something's wrong. We've got to go check this out. And this was the entire family, the whole household living on that farm. You had the patriarch, Andreas Gruber, who had a reputation for being, well, not a nice guy. There were even these dark rumors about an incestuous relationship with his own daughter, Victoria. And then, the most tragic part, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner. It was her very first day on the job, the same day the murders happened. Just unbelievable. So the neighbors, they make their way onto the property and head into the barn first. And what they find? It's just a scene of absolute horror. 4 bodies, Andreas, his wife, his daughter Victoria, and his granddaughter Kazilia, all brutally beaten to death with a mattock, and then stacked together and hidden under some straw. Then they go inside the house, and the horror continues. The new maid and little 2-year-old Joseph, both murdered in their beds. Now, to even begin to understand what happened here, we have to rewind the clock a bit, because this sudden, brutal explosion of violence, it didn't just happen out of the blue. Oh no. For months, this farm had been under siege by a series of really, really unsettling events. It all started about 6 months earlier. The family's maid at the time, a woman named Rieger, she just up and quit, packed her bags and fled. Why? She was absolutely terrified. She was convinced the house was haunted, telling anyone who would listen that she kept hearing footsteps and strange voices coming from the attic. And just like that, the family was left all alone. Okay, now fast forward to just days before the murders. Andreas Gruber, the father, tells his neighbors about something incredibly chilling he found in the fresh snow. He'd seen a single set of footprints, and these footprints led from the edge of the deep woods directly to the farmhouse. But here's the kicker. There were no tracks leading away from the house. None. Think about that. The only conclusion you can draw is that whoever made those tracks was still there, hiding somewhere on the property. And right after that, the noises started. The exact same sounds the old maid had described. Footsteps coming from the attic. Andreas searched and searched, but he never found a single soul. They were literally being stalked from inside their own home. And it just kept getting weirder. All these other disturbing little clues started popping up. A newspaper from Munich that none of them read or subscribed to just appears on the property. Then a set of house keys vanishes into thin air. You'd think he'd be screaming for help, right? But no, Andreas refused every offer of help from his neighbors, even turning down a revolver one of them offered him for protection. And then, on the night of March 31st, that unseen phantom, that threat lurking in the shadows, finally made its move. But honestly, it's what happened after the killings that takes this from just a brutal, tragic crime to one of the absolute strangest and most enduring mysteries of all time. See, the killer didn't just slaughter the entire family and run, not even close. For the next 3 days, 3 whole days, with 6 bodies lying dead on the property, life on the farm just continued, as if nothing had happened. This is the part that is just so profoundly disturbing, it's hard to wrap your head around. Imagine this. You've just murdered 6 people. And what do you do next? You calmly go about the daily chores. You feed the livestock. You milk the cows. You go into the kitchen, eat the family's meals, and you keep the fire going to stay warm. It suggests a killer with zero remorse, someone who felt completely and totally at home amidst the carnage they just created. And the autopsies, they revealed the true, unimaginable horror of their final moments. Little 7-year-old Kazelia, she didn't die right away. The report said she was alive for hours after the attack, lying there in the straw next to the bodies of her mother and her grandparents, literally tearing out clumps of her own hair in agony and terror before she finally passed away.
So the big question is, how did this killer, this phantom, get away with it? How did they just vanish? Well, to put it bluntly, the investigation was an absolute disaster from the second it started, and it pretty much guaranteed that crucial evidence was lost forever.
By the time the actual police investigators got there from Munich, the crime scene was a complete circus. It was hopelessly contaminated. Dozens of people had trampled all over the evidence. They'd moved the bodies. One neighbor even had a snack in the kitchen. And because a big pile of cash was found completely untouched, the most obvious motive, robbery, was thrown out the window right away. And if you want to know just how desperate the police were, get this. With absolutely no leads, the investigation took a truly bizarre turn. They actually sent the victims' skulls to be examined by clairvoyants, psychics, in Munich. And shocker, it didn't lead to anything. So with the investigation basically a dead end, all that was left were theories. And over the next 100 years, dozens of them would pop up. But there are a couple of prime suspects who always seem to rise to the top of the list. Okay, so the two main suspects are guys with really deep personal connections to the family. First, you've got Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He was the neighbor, Victoria's lover, and maybe the father of her son, Josef. His behavior at the crime scene was just off, super suspicious. He seemed to know things only the killer could have known. Then there's the ghost story, Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who was supposedly killed in World War I. But here's the thing, his body was never actually recovered. So did he somehow survive and come back to get revenge for all the family's dark secrets? And I mean, the police looked at everybody. They investigated over 100 different suspects. They considered everyone from political extremists who might have been using the farm as a hideout, to traveling workers, to maybe even an escaped patient from a nearby mental institution. They even thought it could be a roaming serial killer. But every single time, the trail just went cold. This crime left a deep, permanent scar on the whole community. And now, 100 years later, the questions, they still haunt us. They're just as chilling today as they were back then. About a year after the murders, they just demolished the whole farm, tore it right down, trying to erase the terrible memory of what happened there. But during the demolition, they found one last crucial piece of evidence: the murder weapon, the bloody mattock. And where was it? It was found hidden in the attic. The very same attic where the family had been hearing those terrifying footsteps for months. This is wild. In 2007, a group of German police academy students decided to tackle the case again, but this time using all the modern forensic profiling techniques we have now. And they actually came to a conclusion. They believe they identified a single prime suspect. But, and this is so frustrating, because of German privacy laws and the fact that this person is long dead, their name will probably never be officially released. We're so close, yet so far from an answer. And so the mystery just hangs there. The phantom of Hinterkaifeck slipped in, committed an unspeakable act of violence, lived among the dead for days, and then just walked away, melting back into the shadows and leaving behind nothing but a century of cold, chilling, unanswerable questions.